Chào các em. All right, that's Vietnamese for hello students. Chào means hello in lots of languages, but especially Vietnamese. Các means like many of you, and am means you're all littler than me, so I call you am. So yeah, chào các em. Hello kids. Today what we're going to be doing is we are going to be looking at quadratics in factored form, and specifically we're going to be finding the same key points that we found in the other forms. So we'll find the y-intercept, we'll find the x-intercepts, and we will find the vertex. So let's get started. Start by finding the y-intercept. Again, this is going to be the easiest one because it's the exact same process that we've followed before. To find the y-intercept, all we have to do is set the x-coordinate to 0. So let's go ahead and replace this x with a 0 here, and we'll replace this x with a 0 here. And you'll notice that we have 3 times 0 minus 4 is negative 4, and 0 plus 2.5 is 2.5. And then we can multiply all of these together. I kind of prefer to do the ones on the right, because negative 4 times 2.5 gives you negative 10. And 3 times a negative 10 is a negative 30. And there's your y-intercept. I'd prefer you write it as a coordinate. So 0, negative 30 is your y-intercept. Soup's easy? Yes? Great. Let's go ahead and do one more. Replace the x with a 0, replace this x with a 0. So we have a negative times, no, that doesn't mean 20. It means 2 times 0, which is 0. 0 plus 3 is 3, and 0 minus 5 is negative 5. And a negative times a negative is a positive, and 3 times 5, that's a 15. So your y-intercept there would be 0, 15. All right, go ahead and give this video a pause and try the next 2 on your own. And voila, there's their answers, 0, 14, and 0, negative 3. Just simply replace the x with 0 and evaluate it. So the y-intercept, pretty easy. Now we're going to get to the x-intercepts, and this is like the special sauce of factored form. When it's factored form, it's going to be really, really easy to find the x-intercepts. When it was in vertex form, it was easy to find the vertex. When it was in standard form, it was really easy to find the y-intercept. When it's in factored form, it's easiest to find the x-intercepts. So, same concept is going to apply as before. To find an x-intercept, we're just going to replace y, which is in this case f of x, replace it with 0. So 0 equals x plus 8 times 3x minus 2. And the way I'm going to describe this is, you've all seen those memes on Facebook or whatever where it says like 3 times 2 times 1426 times 0 times 1. What does that equal? And because you all know that anything times 0 is 0, this whole thing is just equal to a 0. That same concept is going to apply here, where if I want to make it equal to a 0 on one side, all I have to do is either make this a 0, because 0 times whatever is over here, doesn't matter, will equal 0. And vice versa, if I put a 0 over here, then anything times 0 will end up equaling 0. So what we have to do is we just have to make the parentheses equal a 0. And we're going to set up 2 equations for that. So we have x plus 8 is equal to 0. So I'm going to set up one equation there, and I'm going to set up another one here. 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. And we're going to find what values of x I could plug in to make it a 0. For this first one, just subtract 8 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 8. For the next one, we're going to add 2 to both sides, and then we're going to divide by 3. So we get x equals 2/3. And those will be your 2 x-intercepts. So I'll write them as coordinates, negative 8, 0, and 2/3, 0. So all you have to do, to reiterate, just take each set of parentheses and set them equal to 0, and then just solve each of them separately. And there's your two x-intercepts. Not so bad, hopefully. If you want to double check your answer, let's go ahead and see what happens if we plug in a -8 back into the original problem. If I did -8 plus 8, it equals 0. And it doesn't matter what I plug into this other parentheses because 0 times anything will just equal 0 over here. So by replacing x with a -8 over here, then we just found that it equals 0. And similarly, if we were to plug in a 2/3, then it would also equal 0. So there are your two x-intercepts. Let's do one more together. Again, it's already in factored form for us, so we have to take the y-coordinate and set it equal to 0. And in order to make it 0, we just need to make those parentheses equal to 0. So I'm going to set 10 minus x is equal to 0. And over here, I'm going to put 4 plus 5x is equal to 0. And then we're going to solve for x. Over on the left side, what I would do is I'd add x to both sides. And then we're left with just x equals 10. And on the right side, I would subtract 4 from both sides, and then I'd divide 5 from both sides. Sorry, I'm kind of skipping steps, but we get x equals -4/5. And those are going to be your two x-intercepts. So it would be 10, 0, and it would be at -4/5, 0. So if you were going to graph this, which we will later on, we would have x-intercepts way, way, way out at 10, pretend that's 10, and then this is like a -0.8. It would be at -0.8, not quite at -1, but it'd be somewhere down there. And we'll be able to find some other key points later. We can figure out if it opens up or down. We can figure out what the y-intercept is pretty easily. So those are the 2 points that we found, those two x-intercepts. Go ahead and try the next 2 on your own. Make sure you're really, really good at finding the x-intercepts because that's the purpose of factored form. So make sure you can find those on your own. When you're all done, come on back and then we will show you how to find the vertex. And there's your answers. So the x-intercepts would have been for the first one, 1/4 and -9. And for the other one, it would have been at 3 and -1/10. If you were worried about that minus sign out here, all that does is flip the graph upside down. It doesn't actually change what the x-intercepts are. Now we're going to move on to finding the vertex. And I put a little note up there. Finding the vertex is kind of annoying, and I apologize for that. To find the vertex, we need to use some symmetry properties of quadratics. Once you know the two x-intercepts, the vertex is going to be in the middle. So let me explain that to you. We're going to start by finding the x-intercepts. So we're going to replace y with 0. Eventually, you're not going to need to show your work for these, but I will for now. X minus 8 is equal to 0, and x minus 12 is equal to 0. To solve for x, just add 8 to both sides, and we get an x-intercept of 8. And over here, we get an x-intercept of 12, because we added 12 to both sides. It seems kind of obvious. If you plug in an 8 here, yeah, it's going to be a 0. And if you plug in a 12 here, yep, it's going to be a 0. So if you don't show your work for some of these, that's fine with me. When you start to get longer expressions in there, you'll probably want to show your work. But what we just found is the two x-intercepts of this graph are going to be at 8 and 12. Let's go ahead and see what that means. Here's a graph. Let's go out to 8 here and 12 here. Now I don't know what the graph is going to look like. Perhaps it's going to open up like that. Perhaps it's going to be opening nice and wide like this. I don't really know. But one thing I do know is that no matter what, if I have those two x-intercepts, that vertex has to be right in the middle of them. So if this is at 8 and this is at 12, to be able to find where that vertex is located, it's going to be exactly in the middle of 8 and 12. So the vertex, hopefully you can understand where the middle of 8 and 12 is, but if it's not so obvious, to find the middle, you can just find the average of them. So add them up and divide by 2. 8 plus 12 is 20. Divide it by 2, we get an x-coordinate of 10. So the vertex of this graph is going to be located with an x-coordinate of 10. To find the y-coordinate, all you have to do is plug 10 back into the original function. So to find f of 10, it's just going to be 10 minus 8 times 10 minus 12. 10 minus 8 is a 2. 10 minus 12 is negative 2. And if I multiply them together, you get negative 4. So your vertex would be at 10, negative 4. So it would have matched more that red graph that I drew. It would have just dipped down a little bit more than that. So just to summarize, in order to find the vertex in factored form, first you have to have the x-intercepts. Once you have the x-intercepts, find the middle of it. That's where your vertex has to be. And we'll go ahead and do one more example. This one's a little bit tougher to find the x-intercepts, so we're going to set the y-coordinate equal to 0. Then we're going to set each of these parentheses equal to 0. So we have 2x plus 7 equals 0. And we have 2x minus 1 equals 0. To solve the one on the left side, we're going to subtract 7 from both sides and then divide by 2. So we get x equals negative 7 over 2. That's a negative 3.5. And on the right side, we're going to add 1 to both sides, and we're going to divide by 2. So we get x equals 1/2. So if you were to graph this, just a rough sketch of it, we'd have an x-intercept here at 1/2, and then way back here at negative 3.5. If you like decimals, you can use 0.5. And to find the middle of that, we can add those two together and divide them by 2. So if I take negative 3.5 plus 0.5 and I divide it by 2, that's just finding the average of them, the middle of them. We're going to get a negative 3 over 2, which you can think of as a negative 1.5. So our vertex is going to be, I'll draw it in a different color, right in the middle of those, somewhere at negative 1.5. I know that that's going to be the x-coordinate. So let's go ahead and replace it into the original function. So we have f of negative 1.5 equals 2 times negative 1.5, 2 times negative 1.5 plus 7 times, once again, 2 times negative 1.5 and minus 1. Then it's just a matter of simplifying it. So 2 times negative 1.5 is a negative 3, and negative 3 plus 7 is 4. And on the other side, 2 times negative 1.5 is negative 3. Subtract 1 from that is a negative 4, which equals a negative 16. So your vertex would be at negative 1.5 and negative 16. And go ahead and give this video a pause, try the next two on your own, and then come back as I reveal the answers. All right, you'll notice I didn't give you the answers. Sorry, the Twins are just starting their playoff game today, so I'm going to go watch that. You can always just plug these into Desmos and get the answers yourself. So go ahead and do that, and see you next time. Bye.